In this third section of this lecture number 2 in propaganda, I'm going to go on looking at basically the way that you, once you've identified the other and you've made it clear that you've got another, then you basically get busy attacking them. And you got to keep the pressure on. You got to keep on. I mean, basically, the thing about it is that people have to be trained to hate, which I guess is a good thing. I mean, in the sense that it's yeah. I mean, when you do this kind of study, when you study propaganda, it's not very, it doesn't make you optimistic necessarily about people. People can act terribly in large numbers. And this is kind of like Shakespeare, who hates people in crowds, but is okay with people sort of, in small doses that people want to, anyway. Okay, so you've got to agitate against people if you want to keep up, if you want to make war, literally make war on them. One of the people who's good at this is Bloody Ann Coulter, who on September the 13th, now remember this is before Twitter, and it's actually before social media, it's before Facebook. I'm not sure if we can actually remember such a time. But Ann Coulter is sort of this nightmare of the right. And she went on Fox, I'm pretty sure it was, and said we should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. And she's one of these hardcore right-wing Christians. And the ironic thing about it is that she will be the sort of people who will produce the generation which produces the Trumpers. Now, she was a fan of Trump initially, and then she was like, meh, maybe not. I think she probably liked the white supremacy stuff and the sort of Christian support stuff, even though he's not particularly a Christian. He's certainly not a Christian in practice as far as I can see, but he's not an avowed Christian. Anyway, so this kind of thing is, again, an attack against the whole populace. It's like, just go to war and kill them all, and then the ones we don't kill, we'll sort them out. Okay, so this was a shirt that you could buy at the time. Here are some ad hominem attacks against Saddam. Now, this is when they were still hunting Saddam. And images, these are very, very high resolution images like these particular images began appearing in Baghdad, and they were posting them. They were being posted on walls and lamp posts, that kind of thing. And they are all make Saddam look like basically a woman. Right? So, and in this case, stars, or Rita Hayworth, other Hollywood stars, or little angels from like the Bronzino paintings, that kind of thing, or pinups and so on. Now, it's like, what is the idea here? And the idea is that you. Okay, I'm just going to come in here because I seem to have drifted a little bit while I was talking. The point about these images of Saddam basically as a Hollywood movie star, and it's interesting that they chose movie stars basically from the 40s and the 50s. I think it's supposed to be Jane Mansfield. I don't remember these. I mean, you'd have to look up these images. Rita Hayworth, I remember, is to, I mean, this is the kind of thing which would have been a terrible insult to a Muslim man. I think many men would be insulted by this, even now. But in a culture, I mean, the West thinks it's tolerant of homosexuality. It's like, well, let's see. We'll see about that. Like, how about having a homosexual president? It's like, well, Beto O'Rourke only got so far in the primaries. Anyway, so what we've got here is the shaming of a Muslim man and his sexuality, which we're going to see reappear in. When we cover Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the main point. And that's what I want you to get. And we think we don't know where these bloody images come from. This is what I was beginning to say, is that the images are high resolution. There were a lot of them. It's like, well, who produced them? the best thinking that I've read so far is that it probably was the CIA. And when I show these, when I give talks about this kind of thing, people think these are hilarious. They think they're wonderful. So, which I think is a really good indicator of the fact that this is considered by the West to be successful propaganda, in the sense that they get a good laugh out of this kind of mocking um, of this dictator. So when the French said, the Americans went to the French and said, we'd like you to join our war in Iraq, the French were like, no, we don't think you actually have a case there. The French, as soon as the French said, you know what, no, we're not going to actually go and fight with you in Iraq. Afghanistan, yes, but Iraq, no. Then the Americans turned on the French and savaged them. And they, instead of calling in the White House, and in the not the White House, in Congress, there's like a cafeteria. You could no longer get French fries. You could get freedom fries. Freedom fries, only 50 cents. We support you, Mr. President. This is part of propaganda. It's an attack on the populace who is not you. If the French said, we will not support your war, we will not, that we will go against your war, but that we will not partake in your war. Well, with us or against us, right? Either this or that, with us or with terrorists. So if you are not our friend, you must be our enemy. It's like, okay, the world gets very, very simplistic very suddenly, and that's what you want when you're going to war. You don't want to deal with these complex issues and say, well, why, what are the issues against us? No, we can't have any doubt. Freedom fries. And it took some years for the French fries to actually come back. At a certain point, they were like, okay, we're going back to serving French fries. But this is, and it was successful. I mean, right, this kind of thing, people were like, yeah, yeah, I'm all about that. Okay. These kinds of images began circulating on the web very shortly after the 9/11 thing. And again, the issue is the same, where you're trying to show that your enemy is not a real man. And in this case, because there's sort of, remember, this is now 20 years ago. Being homophobic in public was a lot more acceptable than it is now. And it's still acceptable in lots of places. I mean, I know that people are like, oh, this is unacceptable. It's like, yeah, well, like, I'm just saying that as much as you may think, oh no, this is not true, that's not true. It's like, maybe it's not true in big urban centers like Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal or Ottawa. And maybe it's not true on some parts of the campus, like in MIT. But in other places, maybe it's not so friendly to the LGBTQ population. Like, for instance, in Jordan Peterson's classroom at the U of T, for instance. Okay, so if I give you a little quiz and I say, spot the terrorist, well, it's like, who of these people are terrorists, right? Because we know what a terrorist looks like. A terrorist looks like the guy who is probably below me here. He's over there for me, but he's probably below me here, who has a rocket propelled grenade and looks like he's got a serious attitude problem, and he's all neatly coiffured and so on. And there's this other dude who has some kind of head covering, and just generally looks sort of ethnic, of some variety. Well, what about these other three people? Well, one of them looks like he's, is he Army? Is he Marine? No, he's not a Marine. He's Army. And I mean, this other guy who's in, here's a Facebook picture, and this dude with this neatly manicured beard. Surely these people can't be terrorists. It's like, well, as we know, if you identify what the enemy looks like, then that's going to be your enemy. So Timothy McVeigh, this is the Oklahoma City bomber up above me. Anders Breivik, this is the guy who killed 77 people in Norway. Myron May, responsible for another mass shooting. And then some nameless Pashtun, that's somebody from Afghanistan. The Pashtuns are sort of cross between Afghanistan and they're in Iraq, they're in Afghanistan, they're in Iran. It's a group. It's they're not a nationality. They're Pashtuns. And then some Taliban guy. I think the way I got this this guy was I searched on, I Googled Taliban image, and I got this guy. I'm like, okay, Shutterstock image, of some variety, some kind of like this, somebody like this is what a Taliban looks like. It's like he's got some kind of head covering and he's got an RPG. Okay, so it's clear these people are the terrorists. Actually, no, the three people in the center. Okay, I would say they're here, but I suspect that they're probably over there. Timothy McVeigh, Myron May, and Anders Breivik are the actual terrorists, and it's taken years for the domestic press to start calling people who commit mass slaughters in North America terrorists if they're white. If they're people of color, terrorists. If they're white, they're like an insane individual, an individual with mental instability. Da, 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 da. It's like, okay. It's like, actually, no, that person is a terrorist based on what they did, not based on how they look. Fine.